Hey guys, Matt Allen here. Welcome back to Tactical Bassin. Today we're talking fall fishing. Specifically, some of the common mistakes that I see anglers making that are impacting their fishing. Fall fishing is so good. This is just the peak of the bite right before we head into winter. You can go out, you can catch a lot of fish, you can catch giant fish. It's an amazing time to be on the water. One of my favorite things is there's not a lot of people on the water. A lot of bass fishermen disappear into the woods this time of year, and that leaves the lake wide open for the rest of us. Now, there are some simple things that you can do, some mistakes to avoid that will make a huge difference in your fishing. Today I'm covering the 4 that I think are the most important. Either the most common that we're all doing or the most important that will make a huge difference in your fishing. The biggest mistake right off the bat that I see anglers making is trying to hold on to old patterns. This time of year is all about change. Make no mistake, in fall, those early fall, late summer patterns, they get really good and then all of a sudden they die off. Those fall patterns, they're fading to winter. The bite is in flux. It is changing and you want to change with it. You don't want to be that guy holding on to an old pattern, going back to the lake, doing the same thing you were doing before and just seeing less and less and less results. This is the time of year to stay moving, to stay active, and to try and stay with these fish because they are positioning for winter. Once they get into their winter mode, they're pretty locked down. And if you're on them, the bite can be lights out and it can stay that way all the way through winter. That's why it's so important that right now you don't hold on to your old pattern. If you had fish going in grass and that grass has died or is dying back, give it up. Walk away from that. Look for a new pattern on hard structure. Look for them on rock. Look for them on outside points. Don't be holding on to that fall pattern praying it will keep going because it won't. So that's the biggest thing. Stay adaptable, pay attention to the conditions, and be willing to switch with them. Because if you can lock down 1 or 2 patterns going into winter that are going to hold, that changes the outlook of your entire winter bite. Number two, let's go with blades first. We'll make that number 2. This is a major one. I throw a ton of small swim baits in the fall. Finesse swim baits, paddle tails, whatever you want to call them. And most of us throw them on a bare swim bait head, right? This is the tactical head, the tactical finesse head. I have the Matt Allen head. These are established swim bait heads that are great for baits like Kitech. But this time of year, if you are throwing a swim bait and you're not starting out with a blade on the bait, you're making a mistake. Here's the deal. Now, which one you throw totally depends on your conditions. And I'm gonna talk you through that right now. But specifically, a blade. I don't care which one of these it is, doesn't matter. The power of a blade, there's more vibration, there's more flash. In the fall, bass are very oriented toward bait fish, especially in shallow water, but even in deep water. A blade has more drawing power and it can pull fish away from something else. So if you pull up on a spot and they're chasing bait fish and you throw a bare swim bait in there, you will catch far less fish than if you throw a swim bait in there with a blade on it. It just has more drawing power. It will catch those fish's attention from farther away. It's just a fact. So throwing bare swim baits, at least at the start of your day, is a mistake. You are much better off with an underspin or a bladed bait. Now, I say at the start of your day, there are days where they just don't want it. Maybe they're not super aggressive, maybe they're not chasing bait fish on that particular day, they're more lethargic, and you can slow roll a swim bait and catch them. So I'm not suggesting you take it out of your boat, but you definitely want to start with a blade. Now, I've got a few different baits here along those lines. If they're chasing tiny bait, my number one is a 2.8 Kitech on that Cool Baits head. We've been throwing that for years. That little setup right there will catch a bass in every lake, anywhere in the country. It's not the best bait every day, but it will always catch fish. It's incredible how well that works. I mean, to me, that is equal to a drop shot, a Ned rig, right? Just a bait that I know I can turn to and get a bite, especially this time of year when they're bait fish oriented anyway. It can outshine those other options and be your very best option. And this little guy right here doesn't just catch little ones. I've caught a bunch of big fish on the 2.8. It is a fish catcher, plain and simple. And in the fall, on a lot of lakes, they're chasing little bait, so it's a perfect match. If they're a little more aggressive, the bait's a little bigger. This is the 3-inch Largo shad. We've been throwing this thing all summer and fall, just a little bigger than that 2.8. I'm throwing this one on the Gamakatsu Mini because it's got that drop down arm. The Largo shad has a deeper belly than a Kitech. See, that dropper arm gets that blade down below. If it was on a Cool Baits, that would be pushed up hitting the belly of that Largo shad. Bigger than that, full size, a 4.3 or a 4.8 Kitech on a 1/2 ounce Blade Runner is the ticket. Full size profile. When I get to a lake, a lot of lakes, like reservoir type lakes, Chickamauga, lakes where there's a lot of bigger bait fish, that full profile is a way better deal. And they will mow that down because it's the right size compared to a small one. You're just trying to match the size of the bait fish they're chasing. Now, I do have a last resort, and it's not a last resort because it doesn't work great. It's a last resort because I know I can count on it, especially in clear water. If they don't want an underspin, I switch to this Okashira screw head. And we've talked about this before. You guys have seen us smash smallmouth on it. I've smashed them out here on Chickamauga in grass beds on this thing. On days where they would eat nothing else, I turn to that Okashira screw head. It's a completely different look, but it's a ton of vibration. So the blade is in line, and one side is small and one side is fat. And it creates a very lopsided action. So it's wanting to rock the bait as it's coming through the water. And you pair this up typically with the spark shad. So this little Megabass 3-inch spark shad just threads perfectly on here. And I have so much confidence in this setup, especially as the water is cooling down or in really clear water, when I still want the blade. I still want to stand out from the bait fish, but I don't want a big obnoxious profile that's going to not chase the fish away, but they're not going to react to it the way I want. I can go down to this profile and just blast them. And we have done it over and over and over again, all over the country. My favorite time is Clearwater smallmouth. Cold, clear water. This is amazing. You can go super slow. You throw it on light line, like 6 pound. Spinning rod or BFS, and just creep it. And that blade's there spinning. You're just crawling along and they just eat that thing. So many big ones come on this every year. So again, that second mistake is throwing plain swim baits instead of blades. When bass are chasing bait fish, actively chasing bait fish, corralling shad, pushing juvenile bluegill up into shallow water, chasing little minnows on your lake and kind of corralling them into the shallow flats. When that is going on, a bladed swim bait will almost always outfish a bare swim bait. Next one. You don't want to rely, this time of year, you don't want to rely on bass to want to bite. What I mean by that, the mistake that people make is they stick with the established baits of bass fishing. A shaky head, a jig, a Texas rig. I mean, I could go down the list. The traditional bass fishing baits. A lot of people just throw those things because that's what they know to throw. That is a mistake this time of year. This time of year, if you are relying on a bass wanting to eat your bait, you will catch less fish than a guy who has learned how to get around that. What I mean, if you've been with us for a long time, you know what I mean. There is a difference between a bass choosing to eat something and reacting to something. So, a bait like a Texas rig pulled along the bottom will catch a lot of fish if they're in the mood to eat. If the weather is right, if the conditions are conducive, they will eat and you can catch a bunch of fish. But if something's wrong, barometric pressure's off, weather system just moved through, the sky is too blue that day, sometimes you have no idea why these fish won't bite, but they won't bite. On those days, you can still pound the fish if you understand how to make them react, how to draw a core feed response out of the fish instead of waiting on them to want to bite. There are some key baits that we do this with. But before I get to those, you need to understand that bass are hardwired to feed. They are hardwired to react to aggressive movement, to injured fish. There are things that they just lash out at. It's the way they're built. And if you can take advantage of that, your catch rate, not just in the fall, all the time, will go up. But especially in fall, when you've got all this weather coming through, because we are cooling down, right? There's no way around it. Fall turns to winter. So we are in a transitional period. And as a result, we have storms come through, we get cold, we go back to being nice. It's not ideal conditions every day. And when that's happening, reaction bites are everything. So I grabbed 4 baits, and all these baits, I'll link them down in the video description for you. If these are things you want to try, like that Okashira or an underspin or these, it'll all be linked down there. And then today I'll probably, because I'm not actually fishing, I didn't bring a bunch of rods with me, I will probably link you some really good budget gear for these different things. That's probably the best thing for today, like a really good budget big bait rod or a really good budget finesse rod that will help you throw that tiny stuff effectively without breaking the bank. A really good crank rod, but here, let's jump into it. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. 4 baits that will help you get that feed response. First one, this is the tactical crank. This is the Tactical DD75. Tim and I designed this specifically for fishing right now through the winter to draw a feed response out of big bass. That's what we built this for. Cranking is amazing. Cranking can draw incredible feed responses when you're deflecting and bouncing off of bottom. Works year round. But there was a hole in the market. There were not a lot of good baits. There were a few, but there were not a lot of good baits for fishing in cold water. So we designed this bait specifically for fishing in colder water. It has a very specific sound, very specific tight vibration that works well in the cold. We call this speed cranking. You throw it on a 7-to-1 or an 8-to-1 reel, fast reels. This is not like your grandpa's crankbait fishing. This isn't a 5-to-1 reel slow rolling. This is burn, 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 pause, burn, 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 pause, burn, pause, burn, 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 pause. Freight train. Stop and go as fast as you can go. When that thing flies by a fish, we use almost all completely natural colors so that they can't get a good look at it. The thing flies by and they core response, it's going so fast, and then it stops that they have to chase after it. It's the way they're hardwired. And we play that stop and go game with them, and they just come unglued, and it works. It works even when they don't want to bite. The next one is a jerkbait. This is the Megabass Vision 110. It's an incredibly balanced, incredibly refined bait that is perfect for jerkbait fishing this time of year. The jerkbait, same concept. It's a cat and mouse game. Hard movement, followed by perfect pause, suspended in the water. If there's a fish sitting on bottom and that thing comes over the top of them, they look, they rise to it because the bait's suspended, and on the next movement, they lash out. It's the exact same concept. If you're going too fast, boom, 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 they may not want to run after it. On a day where they're feeding, they will. On a day where they're not into it, they don't want to go that fast. That's why hard movement followed by long pauses is key. That gives them time to do the slow rise when they're being lethargic. So a 3 to 5 to 10 second pause and then a couple more twitches can draw an incredible reaction strike. The next one is a glide bait, a big swim bait. Big baits have big drawing power. They pull fish from a long ways away. It's just something in a bass. If there's a big bait, slow cruising, they come out and look at them. They're just intrigued. They're just hardwired that way. Even if they don't plan to eat them, they come out. Now, the problem with a soft swim bait is that that is relying on them to come out, see it, and then want to eat it. A glide bait can be twitched and worked. So you start off with a slow, natural retrieve, and about every 10 feet or so, you give it 2 quick pop, pop, 2 twitches, and the bait will dart and dart back. The fish come out because that's the way they're hardwired. But when that bait darts, what they think happened is that bait is trying to get away, right? That first hard turn, if this was a real fish and a bass was following it, that first hard turn, that's where the bass is busted, right? The bait fish now knows that the bass is there. And that next fast twitch is the bait making a run for it. In that moment, this bass that was just following because that's the way he's hardwired will either fully commit and crush it, or he's busted and he'll just veer off. It's over. But that fish on a regular swim bait, a soft bait, would have to follow, decide to eat, and commit all on his own. It's different with a glide bait. And if you weren't throwing a glide bait, you never would have had the drawing power to get that fish up off the bottom or out of the cover in the first place. The last one is the A-rig, the Alabama rig. The A-rig, same deal, has amazing drawing power. The key to the A-rig is, again, being aggressive. The schooling effect of an A-rig, you know, looking like 5 or 6 fish swimming together, it has that same effect. Fish just rise to it, just like a big swim bait. And then if you can work that bait, twitch it, pop it, rip it, as that bait opens up. So when you twitch it, you'll see us a lot. I'll be slow rolling the rig, and then I go boom, boom, 2 hard hits. What I'm doing is same as the glide bait. I'm assuming that there's a bass behind it. And when I do that, when I pull, if I'm using a soft rig, that's why we designed the Tactical Flex rig. And again, I'll link this stuff in the video description. But Tim and I built the Tactical Flex rig with Hog Farmer out of really flexible wire, so that when I do that pull, that whole rig collapses. So it's a school swimming together. When they get busted by the bass, they tighten up like a school really does. They group together for safety. And then as soon as I let off, it opens back up. It flares like they're breaking apart to make their run for it. I do 2 of those, and then I carry on. And if there is a bass following with any level of aggression whatsoever, when you do those pumps and that school comes together and flares back out, that's when they smash them. Right when it flares, they'll hit either one of the bottom corner baits or the bottom center bait every time. It's clockwork. So those are baits that can get a bass to eat even when they're not in the mood to eat. The last mistake that I see people make is frankly, they're afraid of bad weather. This time of year, weather is coming in. Rain, snow, cold fronts, it can be brutal. because we've come out of summer and fall, we tend to shy away from bad weather. As anglers, we're like, you see that forecast? It's gonna blow 20 miles an hour and be cold tomorrow. I'm not going out there. You need to get over that. There's a very simple, well, there's two reasons. One, bass feed in that bad weather this time of year. They just do. It's like, I don't actually know what causes it, but it seems like when that really inclement weather comes in, the bass almost have this gut check like, oh shoot, it's almost winter. I'm gonna eat. I don't know if that's really a thing, but that's how I perceive it. That's what it seems like they're doing, because when that bad weather comes in, they absolutely start eating this time of year. The second thing, and this is even more important, the reason why you need to be on the water during those cold snaps. We talked about this in the first mistake, where you need to let your patterns go and find new patterns. These tie right together. This time of year, bass are making moves to winter patterns, period. They make those moves during these cold snaps. If the cold weather comes in on you and you stay at home for a week and then you go back out on the water and think it's great, your fish are gone. But if you're out there in the cold and your fish start shifting, you'll see it happening and you can stay with them. And this is so critical because those patterns that they're shifting into, whatever that may be, whether that may be pulling off a bluff wall and going around the corner and getting on a point, whether that's shifting from the tops of humps and dropping out off the side, maybe they were in the back of a bay and it just finally got too cold and they're done. And they're headed out to the main lake for the entire winter. Whatever it is, as those fish shift, you've got to be on that, because those are the patterns that will stay through all of November, December, and January before the very inkling of the pre-spawn even begins in February. If you can get those patterns today, you're light years ahead of everybody else. And you can catch a pile of fish and you can stay on that pattern all the way through. But if you lose those fish in a cold snap this week because you stayed home, it could take you weeks or a month to figure out where on earth they went. And now you're way behind the ball headed into winter. Guys, I hope this helps you. This is a fun time of year to be on the water. I love when fish are shifting. I mean, I like stability too. It's fun to know you're gonna go out and cream them, but it's so fun to figure out the pattern, to stay with those fish, get them to react, and catch good ones in the mix. Hopefully this video helps you. If it did, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you soon.